Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave from the camera store. Today we're talking about the Nikon Zfc. A few months ago, Nikon launched the Zfc, and we liked it so much we actually did a live stream on it because it was so popular and gathering so much attention. Now, the cool retro style look to this camera really lends itself to bringing back some fond memories of yesteryear with cameras like the FM2. Some people think that this is just a rebadged Z50, but I think there's a lot more to this camera than just that. So we thought we'd go for a very cold walk again here in Calgary through Chinatown and see what I think of this camera after we've had it for a few months. It's clear when it comes to the styling of the Nikon Zfc that they have drawn from their heritage of cameras, especially cameras like this Nikon FM2. This camera was made from 1982 to 2001. That's a huge long run when it comes to a camera design, and the reason it was so successful is that it was very simple and it worked extremely well. Now they've drawn from the older cameras here and put that into the Nikon FC. Not only does it look great, but it has the same kind of mentality behind it. Most of the controls you want to deal with are on the top dial here. When I look at the top of the Nikon FC, everything I want to look at is right there and easy to adjust. Now I like the styling of this camera, but what I really appreciate is this whole top plate and how well it's been laid out. I can quickly at a glance see how my camera is set up for most of the features I'm going to be using. So right off the bat, underneath the ISO dial, we have a quick control switch that'll take us from full auto. If you're brand new to photography and you want to just start off with complete auto, I can flick it over and away I go. Now the ISO dial itself gives me a quick look at what my ISO is set at. If I want to change it, it's very, very simple to do. Push the button, dial it into what I want to. On the other side of the viewfinder, we have our shutter speed dial, and it's quite nice because we can go all the way up to 1/4000th of a second with this particular camera. And at the base of that switch, there is a switch between stills or video. So I can easily switch back and forth between those two. We have our on-off switch and our shutter button and our exposure compensation button. Now the exposure compensation button is nice. It is fairly robust. However, I have found myself knocking it out of place once in a while and had to double check it. I wish it would have had a locking mechanism like the other two dials have. In front of that, we do have our quick record button. If I want to do a quick video clip without switching into the video mode, I can do that at any time. Now with the shutter speed, I can go into the 1/3 stop increments if I want to do that and control my shutter speed through the rear dial. Now, a cute little feature on the top of this camera is the smallest of LCD screens, and it's basically showing your f-stops. It's kind of a cool throwback feature. Back in the day, we would have looked at our film counter with that screen. Now we have a dial on the back and a dial on the front to control things like shutter speed and aperture if we want to do it that way. And with the electronic viewfinder, we're looking at about a 2.36 million dot viewfinder, giving us a pretty good experience with it. It's fairly punchy. On the back of the camera, we have the usual buttons like a playback button, a delete button, things like that. However, we do have the more exciting feature for me, which is the articulating screen. And finally, we have a proper articulating screen on a Nikon camera. I like the fact that I can move it to any angle that I want. So regardless of where my camera is pointing, I can see what the camera is viewing from multiple angles. Now it's just over 1 million dots of resolution, and it is a very functional touchscreen. I can explore the menus and control my autofocus points through it. And as we turn our attention to the bottom of the camera, we do have a battery. It's the EL25 battery, and it's good for about 300 shots. I would highly recommend a secondary battery if you're going to spend all day shooting with it. Now it is kind of cool because this has a USB-C port to it, and with this camera, I can charge the battery through the USB-C port, but I can also power the camera through it as well. Although having an external battery charger hanging off the camera while you're shooting street like we are in Chinatown today is not the most effective thing to do. I would recommend a second battery given the option. And last but not least, it is a single card slot. So for those guys who need double card slots, this may not be the camera for you. But overall, I'm really impressed with the build quality of this camera. For the price point where you're getting in this camera, it's very well set up. Overall, the controls feel very good. They're nice and positive. And I love the fact that at a quick view, I can see what the majority of my camera settings are. I think Nikon's done a very good job with this camera as far as the styling goes, but also with the build quality for the price point. When it comes to the autofocus system of this Nikon Zfc, I'm finding it works really well in a situation like this. I'm enjoying walking around Chinatown and I'm having no trouble at all acquiring focus as quick as I need it to be. It's even finding faces, but it's a very similar experience to what you're going to get with the Z6 II or the Z7 II. The autofocus allows you to track people's faces, and if you take a look at this example here, you'll see how sticky it is as my subject moves around within the frame. We can also check out how fast with this particular lens, the 16-50, it can acquire focus from minimum to maximum. Certainly more than adequate for my style of shooting for today. I'm not having any problems with it at all. Certainly nothing to complain about. The nice thing about this though too is they have the newer feature like they have in the Z6 II and Z7 II, where if you're tracking faces, you can just choose a particular zone you want it to track faces in. Really handy if you're shooting people in a crowd. Now it's also nice we do have an animal section as well, so it's certainly going to help with those furry critters in your life when it comes to autofocus. Now while I'm walking around here in Chinatown just finding all kinds of shots, whether it's street or people, I'm having no trouble at all acquiring focus, and the focus system seems to be working just fine. If I was going to be into much more aggressive autofocus situations, I would look at potentially a different camera. Now when it comes to the image quality from the Nikon Zfc, it's very familiar territory, and that's because it shares the same sensor from the Nikon Z50. And that's not a bad thing at all. It's a 20 megapixel sensor giving us 14-bit RAW files, so there's a lot of meat to those files that we certainly can work with. Take a look at this shot here and how I'm able to lift the shadows without really being penalized whatsoever. I like the detail I'm getting from this sensor, and the color and the quality. Everything is working really well for a camera of this level. It's not going to compete with the Z6 Mark II or the Z7 Mark II. They're full frame sensors and they're bigger and they're better in all different aspects. But for a walk around camera and an entry level camera that this is kind of geared towards, I'm quite happy with the files I'm getting out of it. And when it comes to the video of this camera, it is a pretty cool camera in that aspect. They've really geared it towards content creation and vlogging, stuff like that. From the articulating screen where I can see myself on camera to applying the ability to put a microphone and a headphone jack into this camera. Now a headphone especially is crucial when you're shooting on the street like this. We've been caught many times already. I don't really hear the sounds, but Drew can hear through his headphones some awkward sounds that are coming from the background that are kind of ruining the shot or overpowering it. The best quality we're getting is 4K at 30 frames per second, but I'm quite happy with that. It's more than enough for this style of content creation. With the combination of the headphone jack, microphone jack, the articulating screen, and full autofocus, I'm quite happy with what I'm able to create with this camera when it comes to video. Nikon has created a very cool camera for a lot of entry-level users and people that are just fans of this retro styling. I'm finding a lot of people I've talked to are reminiscing about their old FM2s and their old Nikon bodies because this reminds them so much of it. And even guys that are running Z7s and Z6s are buying this camera because they love the look of it and they just feel this nostalgia, which is really tough to beat. So what do I think of this camera myself? Well, what I'm finding is that there's not one particular item on this camera that really jumps out at me. It's not one spec that's not the highest resolution, not the fastest focusing. It's sort of a combination of everything. But do I enjoy shooting with this camera? And I absolutely do. I like the style of it. I feel good when I'm shooting it, and that's half the battle when it comes to photography. Does it bring a smile to your face? And this camera certainly does. The weight of this camera doesn't bother me. It's 390 grams. It's reasonably well weather sealed, although I wouldn't want to walk around in a rainstorm with it. And if it comes to shooting sports in action, it's going to limit me a little bit. 9 frames per second isn't blazingly fast these days when it comes to that. But overall, when it comes to capturing moments on the street here and shooting family and friends and some scenery, this camera really does a very good job. And I'm quite happy. I don't need that super high resolution. It does make for a very good entry-level camera for somebody wanting to get into photography. Now, overall, I want to know what you guys think of this camera. Is there something that they're missing out? Do you think that this is just a test bed for a bigger, better camera? I mean, I would love to see an FM2 remake, a full-frame camera. Give me a film lever or two. I would take that. I think it'd be super fun. But are they missing something that you guys would wish they'd have? Do you think they're going to carry on this trend with sort of classic-looking cameras? Make sure you leave comments down below. Follow us on Instagram and please subscribe. Hit that notification bell. We'll catch you again next time. Hey, camera store. Hey, hey, thanks for sticking around for this episode. If you want to check out some of our more recent episodes, click up here. And if you're a Canadian and you want to shop local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.